Perched atop the highest point overlooking Gull Lake in southwestern Michigan, 110 feet above its shimmering waters, rises a Tudor-style mansion spanning approximately 1,500 square meters. From a distance, it appears less like a residence and more like a structure from another era, an old European estate meticulously transplanted into the heart of the American Midwest. The designer of this grand property, one of the wealthiest men in the nation, gave it the modest name the cottage. The term may have been an understated gesture of humility, or perhaps a private joke only he fully understood. Maybe it was both. Yet, what makes this story truly extraordinary is not merely the grandeur of the estate, but the journey of the man who built it. For the first 46 years of his life, he was a servant. He was not a master. He worked tirelessly for meager wages, arriving before dawn and often leaving long past midnight. When his superior dictated notes while seated on the toilet, he wrote them down. When his employer rode a bicycle, he ran alongside with a notebook in hand, ready to capture any word that fell from his mouth. There was not even a fragment of personal boundaries or dignity left, and his employer was not a distant authority or faceless figure, but his own older brother. The year 1906 was when everything changed. The once invisible bookkeeper stepped out of the shadows and became one of the most powerful and recognized names in American business. Before long, he founded a company and carried his signature product to the world. And to breakfast tables everywhere. His name became so widespread that it ceased to represent merely a person. It became a symbol of consistency, practicality, and modernity. When the Gull Lake retreat was completed in 1925, W.K. Kellogg had become a household name. The surname he shared with his estranged brother had become the source of both unprecedented success and deep hostility. His brother, once known as one of the most famous doctors in the country, sued him for the right to use the family name. The lawsuit dragged on for years. Once strong bonds nearly snapped. Dialogue gave way to silence. Pride hardened into lasting resentment. Near the end of his life, a letter arrived at Kellogg's estate, a message seeking reconciliation, but it came too late and remained unread. Though this narrative may seem, at first glance, like the story of breakfast cereal, it is equally a story of ambition, betrayal, a fractured family, and the hidden cost of success. By 1925, having reached unimaginable wealth, W.K. Kellogg was 65 years old. His company was producing more than 120,000 boxes of cornflakes each day, supplying breakfast to countless American families. Making a decisive choice, he ensured that train cars loaded with cereal departed daily to every corner of the country. After years of poverty, humiliation, and relentless servitude, he resolved to create something that was unquestionably his own. As his sanctuary, he chose Gull Lake, 15 miles from Battle Creek, an elevated property spread across 32 acres with more than 1,600 feet of private shoreline. The site was both secluded and commanding, a symbolic break from the narrow offices and long-shadowed corridors where much of his life had unfolded under the authority of others. He commissioned the Grand Rapids architectural firm Benjamin and Benjamin with a clear and simple vision. He wanted a residence that radiated timelessness and permanence, a home that seemed as though it had always been there. The structure they designed was a neo-Tudor masterpiece, an homage to English manners. The exterior combined half-timbered walls and stucco panels evoking century-old craftsmanship. Heraldic stained glass windows dispersed abundant light throughout the interior during the day. The roof was covered with large imported tiles, completed with terracotta chimney pots that gave its silhouette an undeniable old-world charm. Every detail projected stability, solidity, and strength, qualities denied to Kellogg in his youth but now placed at the very center of his crowning achievement. Unsatisfied with just one house, Kellogg envisioned the entire property as a rare estate, a perfectly designed world blending grandeur with refined detail. A decorative Dutch windmill rose on the grounds, a subtle nod to tradition and order. Fresh bouquets were delivered daily, sourced from the estate's greenhouse where roses, citrus trees, and vibrant flowers flourished year-round. Along the lakeshore stood a boathouse to welcome guests guests arriving by boat. Elsewhere on the grounds, a pagoda introduced an unexpected Eastern touch to the predominantly European landscape. Kellogg was known for his impatience. When advised to plant saplings and wait for them to grow and mature, he rejected the idea outright. Given his age, he had no time to wait. Instead, large, mature trees were transplanted onto the property. He wanted to reach his paradise quickly and to live in it without delay. Despite all its magnificence, he still referred to the structure as the cottage. To understand how W.K. Kellogg reached this point, one must return to Battle Creek, Michigan, and to the strict religious upbringing that shaped both him and his brother. In the mid-1800s, Battle Creek was no ordinary town. It was the capital of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, whose followers believed the return of Christ was near and that the end of the world was imminent. Members abstained from meat, alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and tea. Pleasure was viewed with suspicion. Discipline was elevated to sacred virtue. The human body was regarded as a holy vessel to be kept pure for divine salvation. Health was not seen as a personal choice, but as a central religious duty. John Preston Kellogg instilled these values into his family with strict devotion. Life's fragility was constantly felt. Of his 16 children, 6 died young from infectious diseases common to the era. For the surviving children, the idea of death was intertwined with morality and divine judgment, becoming a persistent source of anxiety. Born in 1852, John Harvey Kellogg was physically frail due to tuberculosis suffered in childhood, which permanently damaged one of his lungs. Nevertheless, he endured physical hardship with rigid discipline. Church leaders, recognizing his potential, supported his medical education in New Jersey, Michigan, and later New York. 8 years after John Harvey's birth, Will Keith Kellogg was born, and his path diverged sharply from his brother's ambitious trajectory. Will struggled in school, not from lack of intelligence, but because undiagnosed vision problems prevented him from seeing the blackboard clearly. His teachers labeled him slow. His family believed he was inadequate. The boy who would one day build a business empire lived his youth under the label of family disappointment. At 13, he left school and, under his father's direction, went door to door selling brooms. Yet these experiences matured him. He learned to communicate with strangers, endure rejection without anger, calculate costs and profits, and face hardship without support. While his brother prepared for greatness under church mentorship, Will Keith built resilience through commerce and adversity. In 1876, at 24, John Harvey Kellogg returned to Battle Creek with a medical diploma and took charge of the struggling Adventist Health Institution. He swiftly transformed it into the famed Battle Creek Sanitarium, a temple of health where presidents, industrial magnates, inventors, and celebrities sought renewal through discipline and prescribed therapies. His methods were radical even for the time. He believed most illnesses originated in the digestive system. The solution was aggressive cleansing. Patients received daily enemas, sometimes several times a day. Yogurt was administered not only orally, but directly into the intestines. Vibrating chairs shook patients violently to stimulate bowel movements. Electrical currents and light therapies were applied to the body. His obsession with purity extended beyond digestion to sexuality. He viewed sexual desire as a dangerous force needing strict control. He labeled masturbation the solitary vice, blaming it for ailments ranging from acne to insanity. His recommended remedies were brutal and are now regarded as among the darkest chapters in American medical history. The sanitarium's diet reflected these beliefs. Deliberately bland foods designed to suppress appetite and desire. Cornflakes were born within this philosophy, not as comfort food, but as a tool of moral discipline. That same year, 16-year-old Will Keith entered the sanitarium, not as a patient, but as an employee. John Harvey needed someone to manage finances and administration. Will needed work. What began as a practical arrangement became a quarter century of servitude. Will worked longer hours than anyone, managing accounts, correspondence, supplies, and staff. The labor was exhausting, but the humiliation cut deeper. He was expected to be constantly available. When John Harvey rode his bicycle, Will ran beside him. When John Harvey entered the toilet, Will stood nearby, taking dictation. He was permitted to address his own brother only as Dr. Kellogg. The hierarchy was absolute. For years, Will endured it, believing he had no alternative. He had no connections outside Battle Creek, no formal education, no capital. But by the early 20th century, the world was changing rapidly. Battle Creek was becoming the center of a growing health food industry. Others were profiting from ideas born within the sanitarium. Will watched strangers grow wealthy from work made possible by his own labor. In 1906, at age 46, he made his move. He founded the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company and bought out his brother's interest in the cereal business. John Harvey scarcely noticed. To him, cereal was not a business, merely a dietary tool. Will understood something his brother did not. Americans wanted comfort at breakfast. They wanted flavor. He added sugar. He added salt. And then he did something radical for the time. He advertised. Spending a third of his initial capital on a single campaign, he distributed free samples to housewives. Sales exploded overnight. More promotions followed. More distribution. Bigger marketing. And finally, he added what his brother never would: his own signature on every box. That signature became a personal guarantee, a symbol of trust. It is still there today. John Harvey watched his younger brother's success with intense jealousy. He founded his own cereal company under the Kellogg name. Consumers were confused. Lawsuits began. The battle over the family name lasted years, ultimately reaching the Michigan Supreme Court. The central question was this: when Americans saw the name Kellogg on a cereal box, whom did they think of? In 1920, the court ruled W.K. Kellogg won. He was granted the right to use the Kellogg name on cereal products. His brother was ordered to return profits earned under that name. The legal victory was complete. So was the personal devastation. As W.K. Kellogg's empire expanded, his private life grew more complicated. One grandson suffered a tragic accident and was left permanently disabled. His son, expected to inherit the company, was estranged and dismissed. Another grandson, crushed under pressure and circumstances, took his own life. W.K. Kellogg built a company that fed millions of families, but he couldn't hold his own family together. Increasingly, he turned toward philanthropy. He established the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and donated more than half of his company shares to support children's health and education. In his later years, completely blind, he continued to manage the company, attending meetings and shaping decisions through assistance and sheer force of will. In 1943, John Harvey Kellogg, disgraced, expelled from the church and nearing death, wrote a letter to his younger brother. In it, he expressed regret, admitted mistreatment, and acknowledged Will's contributions. The letter arrived at Will's home. Blind and elderly, Will refused to have it read. Days later, his brother died. Only then did Will decide to hear the letter. What he felt in that moment was never recorded. W.K. Kellogg lived 8 more years. He died quietly at 91, the same age as his brother. Today, the cottage still stands along the shores of Gull Lake. Students and researchers walk the grounds, unaware of the decades of ambition, resentment, sacrifice, and silence that built it. Every morning, millions pour cereal from boxes bearing W.K. Kellogg's signature, never knowing the story behind the name. Will Keith once feared he would remain poor forever. He was wrong. He became one of America's wealthiest men, but as a child, he never learned to play. And as an adult, he never learned to forgive. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel.